the better answers come not from you telling a person what to do. The better answers come and the better actions come from them realizing what to do.
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. Welcome back, leaders, aspiring leaders, established leaders, all of us that are on a infinite leadership journey, to another episode of The Few with me. Today's kind of interesting. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today because there's a lot of disruption, a lot of chaos. Oh, by the way, don't forget to like the podcast and review it. Remember, just please, the more you do that, the more we get awesome guests like we do today, where we get to blend a little bit of a personal story, a leadership story. And my favorite topic is helping leaders trying to find some peace and tranquility around this chaotic era that we live in, and probably a chaotic era that's effectively humanity from this moment forward. And that chaos and disruption is only going to increase more and more. Kevin Stealey, mate, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and share your insights with us here on The Few. How you doing? This is being recorded just after Father's Day. I know your kids form a big part of your story. How was your Father's Day?
Well, first, Boo, thanks for having me. Really grateful to be on and had a great Father's Day. We were able to just spend time relaxing, have a wonderful dinner, which we love to break bread and enjoy a nice dinner together with my two teenage daughter and a son, knowing that I am trying to soak in every last minute of them all being under one roof together.
Yeah, it all goes so fast. You know, I was reading this interesting statistic the other day. I was doing some research for a book and I was trying to find stats around how the world has accelerated. And did you know that in 1911, the average family meal time was 90 minutes and today it's 16? So there you go. So you're holding on to an incredibly powerful tradition and probably a tradition that many of us are losing touch as we find ourselves immersed in the digital world and losing the more human side of ourselves as we just constantly grind it out each and every day. I just want to start off with your book because when I was doing my research to speak with you and I saw the title of the book, I thought it was kind of a business book and it was a book about increasing the probability of winning. But you wrote a book that's called Winning Bets. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book? We spoke about it, in the pre-show. I had to kind of call time out there because it was such good stuff. But first of all, what inspired you to write a book? And secondly, what inspired you for the content of the book?
Yeah, well, a little bit, I guess, of wolf in sheep's clothing, maybe, is kind of what it is. And I'll get into that in a moment. First, let me say, I've just grown up in corporate America. I started at Procter & Gamble and spent about 17, 18 years at what I think is one of the great leadership companies in this world with fantastic leaders who all shared their personal stories and journeys as a way to teach me. And that's true to who I am today. And so I'm always looking for what is the story of how I can kind of pass on good wisdom and leadership to my kids in ways that they'll engage and listen. So
you're odd, right? Like now when you're fighting this battle of attention for kids and to have them feel engaged with somebody that's one or two generations ahead. So that in itself is an inspiring story.
Absolutely. I'm fighting with TikTok. I know that as a father. And I'm also fighting an age-old dilemma and battle of, you're my parent. I don't really want to listen to you at this time of my life. And so, but that shouldn't stop us. As any great leader knows, sometimes the organization wants to hear what we have to say. and sometimes they don't. But it is our job to find the ways to meet them where they are, find engaging stories that connect with them to get our message across. And so, simply put, I entitled the book Winning Bets because it's all about the personal leadership bets you should make in life to improve your odds of success. But how I wrapped it in a way that was engaging for them, as you may know, I started a weekly college football pool. And every week I would send out a pick sheet of 10 games that they had to pick with the point spread, right? And I did that since they were in elementary school. And as they got older, they didn't want to engage, or they would sleep in and they wouldn't want to get their picks in on time. So finally, I just started email or text messaging them out the picks. And it gave me an opportunity to write up something that I saw coming in the week of a challenge in the world of college football, but also related to what they were going through in their personal life. And so I would send those text messages, whether they wanted to read them or not, knowing and hoping that it would just soak in. And when I got to the end of a very magical...
Can I just quickly want to stop you there, because
Please.
What you've just said is, I think, incredibly insightful for a parent, particularly a dad, right? Which is, I sent them text messages whether they read them or not. And I think that a big part of leadership and a big part of being a parent, I always say to people, you're not having children for you. You're bringing children into the world to steward them, to make the world a better place. And children being children, I mean, my kids never read their text message. I think they read 20 and they feel just out of guilt that I need to text dad. So that little insight there, I think, just really feeds to your leadership narrative, which is sometimes it's all about the giving without the expectation of receiving.
It absolutely is. I mean, you just have to ground yourself around that. Each of us is truly magical. We all have magic within us. We all have this light. And our job as a leader is to find ways to share that and to give that unrestricted. And the more we find ways to do that, and sometimes we do that in the tips and wisdoms we share. Sometimes we do that in the value we provide. Sometimes it's the support we give others. But fundamentally, it's giving without restriction, even if the person isn't going to read it, right? Because, if you just stay consistent, if you stay principled and you continue to focus, eventually something will connect. Eventually they will get value out of it.
And something must have happened, because you wrote a book. So I presume that wasn't a book of one-way correspondence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously they said, hey, love them, eventually admitted that they would read them. Sometimes they wouldn't read them all, as you cited, but they definitely gave me the feedback to it. And as just a way to continue to serve for them, when I look back at all the text messages, I realized what an amazing set of ideas, leadership ideas, for two young kids who are about to kind of go out into the world and make it on their own and try to be leaders in their own right. Here I could give them this little head start in a way that was incredibly connected to them. And so I did it and bundled it up, and they couldn't believe it when we opened up the book and they saw it for the first time. But it really, I think, registered and became probably one of the greatest gifts I've ever given them.
So what did you learn? I mean, what was in this book that you feel was insightful and has carry on to leaders generally?
Yes. I joke about it because it is a book about, betting, about a college football pool, right? With my kids, who I joke that I taught, the value of a point spread long before I taught them calculus at the kitchen.
Probably way more useful in the big scheme of things.
Probably. Good skill to have. So, I oftentimes kind of a joke about that. But what I often say is, look, I ran a college football pool to teach you that the only bet you should ever really make in life is a bet on yourself. And that this book was not about, if I put, $10 down, what am I going to get back? It's about the things you could do personally in your life, how you could approach your life, how you could approach your dreams, how you could approach your goals, but more importantly, how you could approach your obstacles in ways that will give you the return of a lifetime.
Well, in a way, I mean, that is life, right? Life is a balance of probabilities. And there are things that are 100 to 1, and there are things that are almost a sure bet. And with the limited resources you have in life, and life being a credibility game, I guess it's a good skill to know what to invest in and what to pass on.
Absolutely is. It's nothing more than what I always kind of did in a business sense in terms of setting strategy, where to play, how are we going to win, right? All of these things could be codified as just the winning bets of an organization. I then just brought it to a human level, to a personal level. And what it probably did for me is I wrote this to my kids, but it reinforced what was important to me. It retaught me the things that I cared about as well. And what are some of those core principles of betting on yourself?
You're a CEO now. Tell us a little bit about the current company. You obviously went and restructured, retargeted the business a little bit. Tell us a little bit about stepping into a CEO role of an established company, how to affect that change. And you mentioned numerous times already, maybe subconsciously you didn't realize it, about storytelling and about the power of a story. So maybe bring all that together for us in a bit of a personal story with your own leadership journey as a CEO.
Yeah, RTR Technovation. We are actually a small kind of startup company in the form of creating a therapeutic drug delivery vehicle. And directly to answer your question, when I took over the business, I had come out of a life science business. I'd come out of a tool supplier. So anything you wanted to run in a laboratory, we would sell to you and you could go off and do the research. And our original thinking was we had this amazing nanoparticle, very small technology that could be used to help people do research and maybe could be turned into a potential human diagnostic. And as we work through both where we should play with that technology based on what it could do, market sizes, where are the winning bets, we had to consistently pivot ourselves to being this carrying vehicle for a therapeutic molecule, which that turns it more into drug development, right? So we went from, call it a life science tool all the way into a discovery of a truly new platform technology kind of moving forward. And so you're constantly trying to make what are those winning bets? And within that, I'm trying to do it in a place that has a lot of uncertainty. We don't know the future. We don't know if we're going to make it through, the next round of, preclinical work or clinical work. And so it challenges my leadership abilities to keep people focused, to keep people energized, excited, and making sure that we have our eyes on the prize while we deal with the realities of where we are today.
Tell me a bit of what it's like, because here you are, you're trying to grow a business. It's new. You've got limited resources, no doubt. And therefore you have to leverage every interaction that you have, both externally, I would imagine, with potential customers and clients, as well as internally in terms of keeping the team motivated when something is new, it's not happened yet, right? So you're in that true leadership mode. And I kind of look at leadership as taking a group of people into an unknown to a destination, as opposed to managing people who are doing stuff that already exists, right? So this is a true leadership model here. How do you frame your communication then? I mean, it's clearly you're not constantly informing the team and overwhelming them with information and telling them stories about a future that may not exist. How do you frame your storytelling internally and externally? Like, what sort of practice do you have?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's absolutely critical, right? And it's rooted in situational leadership, right? Because there are a lot of times in the day-to-day, we don't need a story, right? We need to get to the brass tacks and we need to make this to the best of our abilities. And we can't be too caught up in our own, call it visions and strategies and stories, right? But you'll notice at times, even in those conversations, it comes with where are the moments of doubt? When does it creep in? Because the way I view the world where we stand today, and I think for the rest of my life, is that we're in a world of uncertainty. Okay.
And
So,
that uncertainty is short cycle.
yes, absolutely. And so our job as leaders is to provide certainty, is to provide enough certainty for us to move forward with the devotion and the dedication and the commitment and the clarity that we need to get the job done. Right. And so even if you're having a conversation in, let's call it the weeds, you're invariably going to find doubt. And when you find doubt, you have to make sure that you identify that and then use that situational moment to rise them up, to make sure they know why we're doing what we're doing, why it's important, why it's the right decision, and for us to create a moment of certainty for us to act and move forward.
What would that be? I mean, how can you tell if doubt's creeping into a team?
It is harder. We run the company fairly virtually. We're on Zoom as well, or, a kind of video right now as well. I found that in person, it's easier because you can see it and feel it in the energy in the room. I'm an intuitive person. I can sense it. I can see it in body language. That becomes harder when you take it into video. Okay. It becomes probably a little bit harder sometimes with some people, even when you take it into phone calls as well. And so you're always having to try to be the best listener you can be. I always tell people, if you want to be a good leader, be an outstanding listener. The answers are there. You just have to hear them.
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, and I think that's a big lesson for leaders. I think some leaders tend to fall into that kind of directive mode where I got this, I've got all the situational awareness. Trust me, just do what you're told, and we'll be okay. And then the doubt just progressively gets worse, and the disengagement becomes more pronounced. So surely you've got to ask the right questions rather than tell people what to do to get the right feedback. I mean, what have you learned throughout your career is the best way to get people to open up?
How to become a therapist, Boo. No, nobody told me when I became a leader I'd really have to be a therapist. But if you think about that or break that down, and you could call that a therapist, you could call that a coach, you could call that, whatever that might be, the better answers come not from you telling the person what to do. The better answers come and the better actions come from them realizing what to do. And so without being inefficient, you're trying to ask the questions to get them to come up with the right solutions. And I'll take that back to my original training at Procter & Gamble, right? Running billion-dollar brands. We were doing really cool advertising. I was the low person on the totem pole, and we'd fly up to New York for the agency pitch of the next ad campaign. And as the low person on the totem pole, I had to go first. So as soon as the agency and the creatives would put all the ads out there, they'd look down to the lowest person in the room and they'd say, "What do you think?" So I was blessed to come up in that type of environment where I had to connect that gut intuition and be able to express my opinion of where we should go. I bring that up because it's how I coach and I lead today. There's a constant opportunity to make sure that the direction is right and people are headed in the right direction, with also making sure you're training the next level of leaders in your organization by asking them first, what do you think? What should we do? And giving them that opportunity to put themselves out there, to live through the risk of expressing themselves, to learn how to tap into their own intuition, and then to calibrate it with maybe your experience, your wisdom, or, in others, right? That would go after them. And so that's how I think I approach it.
That's what I love about the word wisdom. It's like wisdom is knowledge that requires context, and it's less words with more action-driven insight. I think we live in the world of information where there's a dearth of wisdom, and people try and baffle people with reams of data under the illusion that people make decisions based on logic rather than, making decisions based on a feeling and based on how they perceive you and perceive your product. We were talking earlier around, you have a position on disruption. If you look at the world now and you read the news, as much as I try not to, disruption seems to be feeding fear. You have a slightly different approach, which is to say there's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to disruption. And I guess ironically, you're a disruptor. I mean, your new product, the way in which you're positioning it, you're kind of on the team that everyone's afraid of. I mean, how do you get to a point in life where disruption's no longer something to be feared?
Yes. How do you get here? Well, those of you that might see
we all get there. Sorry, maybe rephrase that. We all get there eventually, right? Because we just realize what's the point. But what would you advise people to get there quicker?
Put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Force change upon yourself, right? Do that. The sooner you can do that in your life, the better. And the sooner you can learn to positively do it for yourself as opposed to waiting for it to happen to you. I completely agree with your assessment that we all get there. And it just comes down to, do we get there by creating change for ourselves and putting ourselves in that area of uncertainty in any area of our life? Maybe it's our personal life. Maybe it's our business life. Maybe it's both. Or are we just waiting for the world to change to force us to change? But we will all eventually get there. It's the one thing that in life that I think is guaranteed to all of us. We will change. We will have to go through uncertainty. And the more you can do it, the more you will grow that skill set. So I think that's the important thing and I would tell any young leader, what I would say is, are you taking on enough risk? Do you know where you're taking on risk? Do you know where you should be addressing? You should have uncertainty and celebrate those areas, because that's growth and development. We oftentimes look at uncertainty as woe is me, but really it's a skill set on how to handle that.
Look, and I think also risk is only risk until it's defined, right? Until the situation is defined. And I think the great thing about disruption is that all these issues that you tend to read about around teams not being engaged, people not understanding, their purpose. Every time you sense disruption, and you do sense it because it's normally like, oh, this is not good. Maybe it's just reframe it. Maybe just go, oh, this is actually a really cool opportunity for us to do some problem solving together, for us to make the world a little bit better, because obviously someone had another idea and it's a pretty cool idea. I wish we thought of it, but how do we then build on that? And the great thing about disruption is disruption can be disrupted, right?
Yes.
It's just the way the world is. So when you feel someone else, a competitor's bought out a new product, or you feel kind of something unexpected, how do you deal with that? Like what's the first thing you think when you yourself personally experience disruption?
Well, I would start with the fact that I probably didn't always have the skill set. So, when you're running a several million to $1 billion franchise at Procter and Gamble, you don't want bad news. You don't want the competitor in the share report to come out on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. to show that you lost share because the advertising you put on air was not the right advertising, right? So I will admit and make sure that people understand that that's a very natural development curve for us all to go through. We first want to make sure that we did everything right and we always get the right answer. But I'm a strong believer in the universe, and the universe has its ways to make sure that it breaks you of that belief or that.
Equip us with these incredible brains to not use them. I think that's the key. Yeah, I think I like to use the analogy of a free climber, rock climber that doesn't have any ropes. It's incredible to comprehend the strength that you have, and the determination you have and what you can do. But it's only when you put yourself in that position do you unlock, because I just think that we live in an era of infinite unlocked potential. The more the computers and the technology and the AI does all the thinking for us, the more anxious we get about thinking, the more anxious we get about being proactive. And what I like about your approach there is what you're effectively saying is, look, get ahead of it. It's going to happen. Be prepared for it. And when it does happen, just accept it. That's just how it works. This moment was always going to happen. Let's not waste the arm waving emotional response, and let's just get into brass tacks and start to work our way through this new situation.
And see it as your personal development opportunity. I think Ryan Holiday always talks about obstacle as the way based on some of the Stoics of history, but seeing a challenge not as something you did wrong, even if it was something you did wrong, that's fine. Seeing it as an opportunity for you to grow your capacity, grow your vessel, grow your skills, grow who you are, and grow who you're becoming. And I think that's really the fundamental change that really makes a very strong leader. When you can go from trying to be perfect and get it all right and act like it's all right and keep it all in control, to doing all the activities that will influence that, yet knowing you're still going to end up with a moment that's not under control and there's going to be uncertainty, and that's coming at faster and faster and faster rates. So you better just get comfortable working through that uncertainty to a place of certainty. And working through that obstacle and knowing that that's one of the greatest gifts you can have in life.
Yeah, it's so true. And also, when it comes to making a mistake, the worrying about it, the hiding about it, I think that the sooner you rip the Band-Aid off, the sooner it's just out there and it says, oh, made a mistake. Most people don't make mistakes on purpose, right? No one deliberately goes out and says, I'm going to make a bad decision today. But to understand that is part of the learning process. And particularly, to your point, in terms of understanding risk, the further out, the newer the product, the bigger the change, the more risk you're going to have to deal with and the more mistakes that you're going to make. And I think culturally, actually, I'm going to put this into a question. How do you create a culture inside an organization that accepts that?
Man, I'm trying to even work on that personally myself, right? Because at the end of the day, I never wanted to fail, right? But what I found is some of the greatest gifts of my life have been through moments of failure. And I've been blessed enough that those failures aren't catastrophic, and I've made some right winning bets to make sure that even when I failed, the world didn't blow up on me. But, I'm constantly making sure that I feel comfortable, have a healthy relationship with failure, as long as I'm pushing myself to my full extent to try to use all that limitless potential that you talk about. And I think when we're doing that, we should welcome any failure that comes along the way. Because as the old adage says, if you shoot for the stars, I guess you'll end up at the moon, and that's a pretty darn good place to be. And so I just try to think about it in that framework. So as long as your goal is big enough and you're stretching yourself to truly expand your potential as a human being, the failures will come. They have to come. You won't get better if you don't see them and you don't feel them and you don't feel the pain of them. And if you talk to any successful person in business, in sports, in life, they will tell you that. And so really it's creating that healthy relationship, making sure that if I'm doing what I'm doing, if I'm living up to the bargain of that equation, then failure will happen and that is okay. And I'm going to be okay. And I think trying to make sure that I model that and help other people understand there are things we can control and we should really optimize to not fail in those things that we absolutely control. Do we show up every day? Do we work hard? Do we really put in the reps and the hard work that is needed to be the champion we want to be? If we do, we separate ourselves out from what the result is and we accept what happens and then we act from there.
It's great advice. I think one of the recurring themes on this podcast is leaders reinforcing that you just have to lean into the things you can control, and you got to be good at that. And there's no excuses there, right? To define what those things are. And that is actually what helps you prepare and adapt to the things. If you don't even know what you're doing, if you're not even good at the things you can control, when disruption comes, it's going to be a complete nightmare. So Kevin, as we come into the back end of the podcast, I'd like to ask, leaders to just share some personal experiences with us. In your lifelong journey of leadership, both as a father and in business, what would you say were the 3 biggest leadership lessons you've learned and rely on at this point in your career?
Well, I think what we just landed on is critical. You can frame it a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, controlling what you can control and putting your hard work into truly the things that you can control. So what I tell my kids, what I tell myself, and I try to live to, and I tell everybody that I talk to is that, look, you can control when you wake up in the morning. I'm not advocating for a crazy extreme routine, but you can control when you wake up in the morning. You can control what you do first thing. You can control certain elements, right? You can control your mind, and you can control your reactions to what happens in this universe. And so I think fundamentally, when I really learned that as a principle and started practicing that every morning when I wake up, that created and unlocked new potential in my life, in my days, in my months, in my years, in my life. So I think that's, critical, lesson number 1. Lesson, I think, number 2, Boo, would be around, know what's important to you. Have your compass, have your guide. I was taught a long time ago to kind of write my own little leadership compass around things that are important to me. That's kind of shown up in my book, Winning Bets, right? And make sure that you do your best to live up to those standards. Declare them, set them, and live up to them, right? And do your best every day. And hopefully you've set them pretty stretching in a way that it might be hard some days to live up to them. You may not always do it, and that's okay. But know kind of what's important to you, where you're going, and how well you're living up to that on a daily basis. And then the last thing I would reiterate, and which has been really critical for me, is that the universe will give you a moment in time where you have to make a choice. And that choice is going to be whether or not you are going to bet on yourself. Period. Now, for some people, that may be to go be an entrepreneur. For some people, that just may be to take on the next project within a large company or ask for the promotion, but it's fundamentally set in, do you believe in yourself in this moment, when you're in a moment of dilemma, in a moment of uncertainty, to say, this is going to be okay. I'm going to make this decision. I am going to bet on myself. I am going to move forward, and I am okay. And I will deal with whatever comes, and I'll be all right. I'll figure it out.
That's great. That's great advice. I once heard someone say, I just know that my future self is a kick-ass version of myself. And they're the ones that are going to deal with it. Kevin, hey, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and sharing those insights with us today. Perfect last name for a leader as well, Stealey. I mean, let's not forget that sometimes the leadership role is just being consistent and gritting your teeth through some of those moments where it is disruptive. You don't know what's going on. The team doesn't know what's going on. Yeah, but it's your job to serve them and navigate that journey, as you sort of mentioned before, around consistency. Kevin, how can people find you?
Find me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Kevin Stealey. You can find me on Instagram. It's KSTEALEY. And you can email me at kevin@kevinstaley.com for any direct requests.
Awesome, everyone. And we'll have those links obviously down in the show notes. Just rewind if you're in the car and you can't read them. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on The Few. Again, just to remind everyone, please, as you tune out of this podcast, like it, review, wherever you are, make sure that you share the love so we can continue to get great guests like Kevin on the show to share not only their leadership stories, but their personal stories as well. Kevin, thanks so much. I really appreciate you. Very grateful for you to take time out of your day to share your insights with myself and our listeners.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I love what you do. Keep doing it.